on a dreary afternoon in 1889, post-impressionist painter Vicent Van Gogh sat alone in his room staring at one of his latest pieces, a still life with a skull. He felt disheartened. The piece seemed lifeless. He looked at it for a long time before turning to his assistant and saying, "There is something wrong with this picture. It has no vision." The assistant didn't understand what he meant by that, but he was soon going to find out. Van Gogh went back to work on the canvas, adding more strokes here and there, trying to fix what he thought was a soulless painting. But nothing seemed to work, and so he stopped and looked at the wall behind his easel. That's when he started speaking again, this time to himself. There are no more than 3 or 4 really original ideas in the world. Everything that men do comes from one of these. But the difficulty is to make it one's own, to adapt it to oneself, and to realize it. As he was saying this, his eyes fell on a newspaper lying on the floor, a copy of Latang with a headline that read, "Bankers at War Over Gold." Picking up the paper, he started reading. They are fighting over who owns the gold, the British or the French. And a sudden realization hit him. This is how it feels to discover something new. This is the missing piece of the puzzle. This is my vision. But before he could explain it to his assistant, the door opened and in walked 2 gentlemen, art collectors from Paris. They were friends of Anna Bach, the wife of Belgian painter and friend of Van Gogh, John Antoon Bach. They had come to visit Van Gogh's studio and see his works. They entered just as he was putting down the newspaper, but they couldn't help but notice the fiery look on his face and the wild expression in his eyes. "What's all this about?" one of them asked. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Van Gogh quickly tried to hide the newspaper under his coat. He replied, "Nothing, nothing. It's nothing. Just some business matters. I won't trouble you any further with them." The 2 collectors didn't think much of it and started examining his paintings. One of them even offered to buy the skull painting, but Van Gogh refused. As soon as the door closed behind the departing collectors, Van Gogh turned to his assistant, Joseph Rousseau, and said, "Joseph, I have just seen the birth of a new world. There is a revolution going on and no one knows it yet. I must paint it." He tore the still life with the skull into pieces, throwing the shards onto the floor. Then he grabbed a new canvas and started painting furiously. He painted a wheat field under a stormy sky, flashes of lightning illuminating the dark clouds. In the center of the field stood a bare tree. At the top of the branches, Van Gogh painted a strange symbol made up of squiggly lines, geometric shapes, and random dots, kind of like a child's drawing. However, if you take a closer look, you can see that this drawing hides another image, an image of a flower. It may be hard to make out, but it's definitely there. This is what Van Gogh told his assistant. "I want to show the revolution that's happening right now, the revolution against money. See that tree? That's the old world. And this," he pointed to the symbol, "this is the new world. This is the future." You're probably wondering what this drawing is, and that's because it's not a real flower. It's actually the logo of the first ever cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Now, you might be asking yourself, did Van Gogh really predict the invention of Bitcoin? Well, let me tell you, the answer is not so simple. The truth is that Van Gogh was not a prophet. He didn't see into the future. What he did was stumble upon a revolutionary idea by accident and saw its potential. That idea was a new type of encrypted digital cash, and although Van Gogh didn't know it yet, the fact that he saw its potential means that he was part of the revolution. So, let me explain. Back then, in 1889, banking was done by private institutions and governments. If you wanted to send money to someone overseas, you would have to go through a bank and pay high commissions. Not only that, but it could take days for the transaction to go through. It was simply too complicated and expensive, so people could only send large amounts of money, which was why trade was limited. For example, if a merchant in France wanted to import fabric from India, he would have to pay a lot of money in taxes and wait weeks for the fabric to arrive. But if he could somehow get the fabric directly from the producer without paying taxes and get it in a matter of hours, he would save a lot of money and increase his profits. That's exactly what Satoshi Nakamoto did when he invented Bitcoin, a decentralized digital currency that doesn't rely on banks. Think about it. When you pay with a credit card, you're actually paying with your own money. The bank just allows you to borrow some more if you need it. But when you pay with Bitcoin, you're paying with someone else's money. The catch is that you have to pay back what you owe in the same currency. This makes Bitcoin an excellent tool for international trade because it eliminates the need for third parties to mediate the transaction. But how does it work? Let's say our merchant in France needs some fabric from India. Instead of paying with euros, he can pay with Bitcoins. When he pays, he receives a record of the transaction, which he keeps in his wallet. This record also goes to the person he bought the goods from, the Indian producer. This way, both parties keep a record of the transaction. But what if the merchant wants to sell some of the fabric in Germany? Can he use the bitcoins he received from India to pay the German merchant? Of course he can. The only catch is that he needs to pay back the bitcoins he owes to the Indian producer in the same currency. This makes trading easy and cheap and also prevents fraud. But isn't this just another form of money laundering? Well, no, because the transactions are recorded in a public ledger called the blockchain, which is available for everyone to see. This way, nobody can cheat the system because all the transactions are transparent. But wasn't Bitcoin invented in 2008? How come Van Gogh knew about it before it was invented? Here's the thing. Van Gogh didn't know that Bitcoin already existed. What he did was stumble upon an idea that was in the air, an idea whose time had come. You see, before Bitcoin, many people were thinking about ways to make banking easier and cheaper. The internet had made it possible for people around the world to connect with each other and trade goods. All they needed was a cheap and easy way to pay for them. In fact, before Bitcoin, there were already several attempts at creating digital currencies, but none of them worked because they relied on centralized servers to keep track of the transactions. But by 1889, the idea for Bitcoin was already in the air. Many people, including Van Gogh, could sense that something big was about to happen. So when Van Gogh tore up his painting of the skull, he wasn't just discarding an unfinished work. He was rejecting the old ways of doing things. He knew that the world was changing, and he wanted to be part of the change. That's why he painted the Bitcoin symbol, so that people in the future would know that he was one of them, one of the revolutionaries. And here's the amazing thing. Even though Van Gogh died believing that he was painting the future, he actually was, but he didn't know it yet. However, his assistant did. You see, Joseph Rousser, Van Gogh's assistant, was no ordinary man. He was a secret agent working for the French government. He had infiltrated Van Gogh's circle to spy on him and report back to his superiors. When Van Gogh showed him the Bitcoin symbol, Russell knew exactly what it meant. He had been following the development of cryptocurrencies and knew that something big was about to happen. That's why he never revealed his true identity to Van Gogh. He didn't want to scare him away. In fact, he became Van Gogh's best friend and confidant, listening to his every word and watching his every move. But Van Gogh never suspected a thing. He trusted Russell completely and told him everything about his paintings and his life. It was Russell who encouraged Van Gogh to keep painting and not give up, even when he was having a hard time selling his works. He was the one who brought Van Gogh the news about the revolution in Russia and the fall of the Tsar. And he was the one who introduced Van Gogh to the dealer that eventually sold his painting, Sunflowers, for a record price. But Russell's loyalty was not unlimited. After Van Gogh died, he revealed his true identity and handed over all his notes and sketches to the French government. To this day, we don't know what happened to them. Some believe that they were destroyed, but others claim that they are still hidden away in a secret location. If they exist, they could shed new light on one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Van Gogh: the question of whether or not he really was crazy. Now, check out the real reason Van Gogh cut off his ear, or have a look at the story of Paul Gauguin, the post-impressionist painter who lived in Tahiti.